On our program today, the first topic, we want to begin with the newly released China's economy data for the year 2017 by the National Bureau of Statistics. China's economy grew 6.9% year-on-year in 2017, reaching 82 trillion yuan. That's according to the official source, of course, maintaining a momentum of stable and sound development. According to data from the country's top statistician, it's well above the official target, around 6.5%. This is the first pickup, according to official statistics, in growth in 7 years.
Upbeat growth for China's economy in 2017. GDP grew 6.9% compared with the previous year, above the annual target of around 6.5%. Preliminary estimates show that the GDP exceeded 80 trillion yuan. The year-on-year growth was 6.9% for the first 2 quarters and 6.8% for the third and fourth. The head of the National Bureau of Statistics, Ning Jizhe, said the expansion was driven by a slew of factors that include supply-side reforms, rebound trade, and high infrastructure spending. Unlike previous years, growth in trade became one of the major contributors in 2017, yet the external environment for import and export this year may not be as favorable.
Last year, exports realized a double-digit increase. Yet what's more gratifying is the structure of export has been improved, with more value-added products being exported. We will continue efforts to promote China's competitive advantage and create a win-win environment for all countries.
And the quality of the growth is on the fast track as well. The supply-side structural reform was further pushed forward, with transformation and upgrading achieving a new high. The industries of steel and coal have fulfilled the annual task of cutting overcapacity, and innovation-driven development continued to gain momentum. The new driving forces grew rapidly. Consumption has emerged as a major driving force for economic growth. The Chinese economy has been optimizing and undertaking tremendous transactions.
Our economy is shifting from solely relying on heavy industry to a joint driving of the heavy and service industries. On the demand side, the driver has been changing on investment to a combination of investment and consumption. Finally, the old way of depending on exports has been switching to export plus import driven.
Ning also says China will continue to advance the supply-side structural reform in 2018 with more efforts to upgrade economic quality.
For more on the Chinese economy, according to the official data, we are now joined in our Beijing studio Liu Baocheng, who is a professor of ethics with the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, Professor. In Hong Kong, we have Xiao Geng, a professor of finance and public policy at Hong Kong University. Welcome, Professor, back to our program. Also joining us in Washington, D.C., Jim Ma, Chief China Economist of the Institute of International Finance. Welcome as well. I want to start with the 2 Chinese economists in Hong Kong and in Beijing. Professor Liu.
Yes.
The number seems great. Behind this rosy number, there are concerns whether the numbers are really painting the real picture of China's economy, particularly given the recent incidents in which local economies claimed higher GDP numbers previously, at least.
Well, I think the fact that we are able to expose those falsifications shows quite a confidence, and also there have been a number of corrective measures that have been taken place to really to compensate some of the falsified numbers. So through sample study and also through direct reporting from different sectors, instead of only taking into consideration of the local government report.
I see.
And right now we do see that some encouraging or brownie points are going on over there. Supply side reform is really generate inflation, and also the consumer confidence is quite much there. CPI is still within 2%. So export, again, we are back for the double-digit growth. So these are really very encouraging signs.
All these are based on numbers.
That's
when you are reading those numbers. So let's go to Professor Xiao. Not the first time, Professor, you and I have been talking about the statistics. The question related to the statistics also. How do you see the recent incidents? How much do you think the Chinese economy was what was illustrated and is being illustrated and will be illustrated? Professor Xiao.
Well, I think the macro number actually did not change much, and very similar to the expectations. And also now we are not so much, focused on the growth numbers. So what is important is actually the regional differences. I was in southern China. The growth there in terms of quality and quantity are pretty impressive, but I know in other regions are not so good. So I think if you want to know the real situations, we need to look at the regional and sectorial numbers. That will be more informative.
But the natural question, of course, Professor Xiao, is where are those numbers come from?
Well, I think the accuracy of the statistics varies a lot across Chinese regions, and the key is really the fiscal revenues. And if you have such large, you're trying to double counting a lot of GDPs, then you have to deliver tax revenues to the central government. And you have to use that for public purposes.
All
so
right.
that's a constraint which you will eventually limit this double counting.
I see. Professor Liu, agree with that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree, because there has been the good reason for double counting in a number of cases. For example, the centrally owned enterprises, they are also counted as part of the GDP locally, but they will have to be deducted at the central level, and also that the samples that are really collected by the central statisticians will be able to rectify and also to correct some of the miscounting even by local officials. But the key is that why some of the local officials are really motivated to falsify. So I think we need really to change the job performance evaluation criteria, so that they will not really be there to be motivated to do that, and also that we also need to include more sophisticated measures to check on their performance during the entire process.
Okay, since both of you have talked about the numbers, let's move on to another topic related and sometimes not necessarily related to numbers. Mr. Ma, the fundamental question is, what is the quality of the Chinese economy, and what is the quality of the Chinese economic development? On that bigger issue, without really have to look at the numbers, what would you say?
Thank you. Before answering this question, may I just still move back to add a few more points on the first question just raised?
I can tell all the economists have been dealing with the numbers a lot, and you wouldn't move away from that question. Go ahead, Mr. Ma.
Right. Yeah, thank you. This is an important subject. Yeah, we noticed several local government overstate the GDP, and it's almost a certainty that we will see more local government have overstated GDP. But however, people need to remember, this is nothing new. For decades, the aggregation of the local GDP came a couple percentage points higher than the national GDP. Well, how does that affect the 6.8, 6.9 number we saw today? People need to remember, the National Statistics Bureau did not simply add up the local GDP to give you the nationwide GDP. Many data points was collected or submitted directly from corporate, from companies, from economic entities to Beijing, totally circumvent the measuring by local government.
Do we know the percentage?
That means that, we do not know the percentage, but that simply means the overstatement by some local government of the GDP number should not affect the final number reported by the National Statistics Bureau. So in this case, I still have faith in the 6.9 number reported.
Okay.
So go back to a second question.
I'm glad. Go ahead. The quality of the economy, sir.
Yes, that's an excellent question, because we do see the structure of China's GDP change a lot, China's economy change a lot. So for the 2017, obviously, China's GDP depends much less on the old, heavy, capital-intensive style industries such as steel, coal. So that's why the air in Beijing is cleaner. And we also noticed the new emerging technology sectors especially in southern China, in the Pearl River Delta, like Professor Xiao Geng just mentioned. They are very vibrant, they are very productive, and they're very competitive.
Right. But you cannot just say one area represents the whole China. You just argue about that yourself, right? So you cannot say one area vibrant and therefore the rest of China's economy has been as vibrant as you just mentioned.
No, but we can see they're kind of pivoting away from the old steel and coal and towards more service and technology sectors. So this is happening.
Mr. Xiao, what about that question, the quality of the economic development? What are some of the barometers actually we could use? Because we cannot just say, I feel. As an economist, you have to use barometers, statistics, you have to use certain categories of things in order to come up with your conclusion. Professor Xiao, what are the barometers we are using about China's economy, particularly its quality?
Well, I think the quality is actually relative to what we call people-centered economic progress.
I see.
So we need to look at how people's living standards are improving, and this is the key. We can't just measure GDP. Because some of the GDP may, you dig a hole and fill the hole again, that are all GDP. So what is relevant is that the people's actual living standards, where they live, what they eat, whether it's safe or not, and how clean the air, and also what I call last miles. A lot of things like traffic in the cities, whether they're improving. All those dimensions are important. And unfortunately, we don't have yet such a good measurement on the quality of growth.
So this is a very interesting question, gentlemen. The three of you have articulated this very beautifully. That is, how do we judge our economy? What is the standard that we should really use? Official standards that we should really use and be sticking to it every year. When it comes to the quality of the GDP, there was the so-called debate about the green GDP. It has been debated sometime and then it fades away. There seems to be currently another round of debate about whether GDP is still relevant, what is relevant. We don't know whether this discussion will become sophisticated and eventually leads to some really concrete and satisfying results. And another thing is, how do you see the quality of the GDP vis-a-vis the quality of the economies developed elsewhere? So these things are all related. I'm sure China needs to answer that question. And those questions now, because China's economy become the second largest in the world. So Professor Liu, what are the things we should use, really? Real barometers.
Yeah, number one is the structure of the growth driver. So whether investment is driving more of the economy or consumption, or whether the government investment or private investment is driving the economy. So that's one parameter. And the other is really the government expenditure, how much is put on the soft side, for example, on education, on environmental protection, and then, how to measure people's living standard in terms of the, the household spending.
Right.
How much is really spent on housing, on children education, and on leisure, on sports, etc. So these are really the sanctioned measurements to qualify a GDP. So overall, the quality is measured in terms of the, the environment, social development, and the economic gains.
Just to indicate how important this is, according to National Bureau of Statistics, once again, these are official statistics coming from the Chinese government side, central government I'm talking about. China's GDP rose to 82.7 trillion yuan. It means that China's economy grew to about 2/3 of the size of the United States last year. And experts say that at the current rate, China could overtake the U.S. within the next decade. Well, of course, once again, we want to illustrate that this is also according to the official statistics coming from the Chinese central government. So, Mr. Ma, here is the thing. How shall we answer ourselves about what things are we using to articulate exactly what our economy is like and where it is going? Particularly 2018 is the first year of the 19th Party's Congress blueprint being implemented.
Right. Even though there's no one catch-all statistic to measure the quality of growth, but the evidence are pretty abundant at the sector-level data. So, for example, we know in 2017, 2/3 of the growth was driven by consumption, not just investment. Service sector in the share of GDP is much higher now. And also, if you look at the value added of the industrial sector, even the overall growth rate only 6.2, but the growth rate of value added by the high technology sectors, such as computer, IT products, even auto, they are all growing at double digits. And if you look at the export data, just like the spokesperson just mentioned in the video clip you've shown, that even the growth rate of the export high technology product are much higher than overall export growth rate. So those data are pretty abundant at a more detailed sector level.
Okay, having said that though, Professor Xiao, we are moving to a new era. And therefore, some of the systems need to be perfected, and also we need to have a new vision. As an economist, given the recent data, given the recent debates about the data, and also a debate about the new vision, what would you suggest? How that is going to be related to the governance structures and the way to judge the quality of governance?
Well, I think again the issue is really about a change from in the previous year we have so-called land-focused growth, region-focused growth. But now we really need to focus on people. How to improve the living standards of the people. And because the population in China are actually shifting a lot. So we need to rethink about where are the people now and what they want and what they are doing, especially how to improve their productivity. Because our productivity is still only 1/5 of that of the United States. So we have a huge gap in improving those productivities, and particularly the people's productivity. So I think that is really a challenge, because we build so much houses, all over China, but the people just like a few places. That's a problem.
Right.
We really need to think about how efficiently to grow in the future.
Professor Liu, before we go, very briefly from you, on the one hand, confidence is very important. On the other hand, one has to have a very articulative understanding of the reality. So how to balance, and when it comes to economic outlook, where should China stand, Professor Liu?
Well, I think we are still very much resolved to the qualitative growth in terms of the not only the GDP but also disposable income among people, and also the people's education, how to raise productivity, and also to enlarge the share of the green economy in the whole entire pizza pie. So these are the directions that we cannot really deviate.
All right. We want to thank the three of you, three economists, for sharing with us your insights and your understanding of the realities and your hopes for the future. Really appreciate it. Jin Ma, Xiao Geng, and Liu Baocheng. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.